A British think tank is sounding the alarm because Brexit has exacerbated drug shortages. But the government still appears calm here. Well, drug shortages in the UK have more than doubled between 2020 and 2023. That's what a recent study by the Nuffield Trust reveals. Brexit is cited as a significant factor exacerbating the country's struggle to manage shortages in medicine supplies. Since the UK departed from the European Union in January 2020, the nation has grappled with persistently heightened shortages, particularly concerning crucial treatments like antibiotics and epilepsy drugs. The research highlights a substantial increase in warnings issued by drug companies regarding impending shortages. In 2023 alone, there were 1,643 warnings compared to 648 in 2020, and consequently, the government has found itself more frequently reimbursing pharmacies for purchasing drugs above standard costs, with price concessions soaring from 20 instances per month before 2016 to a peak of 199 per month in late 2022. And citing Mark Dahan, the Brexit program lead at the Nuffield Trust, the Financial Times highlighted that the challenges extend beyond Brexit, with global issues such as disrupted import chains from Asia due to COVID-19 exacerbating the situation. Exiting the EU has compounded these issues, causing disruptions in the smooth flow of products across borders and potentially limiting the availability of alternative medicines in the long run. The report underscores how Brexit has intensified vulnerabilities in global and UK-specific drug supply chains. Customs checks at borders and increased regulations for manufacturers, including those related to the UK's departure from the European Medicines Agency, have further complicated matters. And some companies have even opted to exclude the UK from their supply chains now. In addition to Brexit-related challenges, the UK's Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, the MHRA, has struggled to approve drugs at the same pace as the EU, hindering the entry of generic medicines into the UK market. Surges in demand for certain drugs, coupled with UK pricing policies, have further strained supplies in the country. Despite efforts to address these issues, such as establishing a critical imports council, concerns still need to be addressed about the UK's ability to mitigate future shortages without access to EU solidarity mechanisms. Britain's Doctors' Union has also accused Prime Minister Rishi Sunak of using dangerous rhetoric to incite sentiment against sick people. Sunak announced last Friday that he would, among other things, reform the system for sick leave and support benefits if his party were to be re-elected. Since the pandemic, there have been too many people who have stopped working, he said. The British Medical Association, the BMA in turn, took the government to task in view of the underfunded National Health System, the NHS. The Prime Minister should concentrate on ensuring that patients receive treatment instead of spreading hostile rhetoric about an alleged sick leave culture. With a waiting list of millions waiting for treatment, delays in diagnosis and the resulting pressure on GP practices, patients are unable to get the treatment they need to return to work, criticized Katie Bramall-Stainer from the Association of General Practitioners. The Conservatives have been in power in Great Britain for 14 years. The party has long been well behind the opposition Labour Party in opinion polls. And the British must elect a new parliament by January 2025 at the latest. Figures from the Statistics Office suggest that 2.8 million people were out of work due to long-term illnesses, as the government said. At the beginning of last year, half said they were suffering from depression or anxiety. This also leads to an unsustainable increase in social spending. Several organizations called on Sunak to improve healthcare. But those are words that you rarely hear from a prime minister, especially from someone who wants to be elected in January at the latest. Rishi Sunak said that a culture of sick leave had become established in Great Britain, and he now wanted to put an end to this practice. There's over-medication in combating common fears, and this in turn means that the number of people unable to work due to psychological problems has skyrocketed. The speech lasted just under 50 minutes, and Sunak gave it on Friday morning at the Centre for Social Justice in London. As usual, he served the news in portions, 1 or 2 sentences, a pause, letting the content percolate, then moving on. And the British Prime Minister presented the key points of his reform of the social system, led by an analysis that was quite ruthless. He called the increase in social spending, as I said, unsustainable, and said he would not accept that 2.8 million people are now unable to work due to long-term illnesses. Great Britain has 67 million inhabitants. Something has gone wrong since the pandemic, says Sunak. The number of long-term sick people has increased by 850,000, and half of those affected say they suffer from depression or anxiety. Sickness benefits for working-age people cost £49 billion last year and are set to rise by a further £20 billion by the end of the decade. And if you include housing allowances, the cost of social payments to long-term sick people already amounts to £69 billion. Britain spends more money on this than on police or schools, Sunak says. The largest proportional increase in long-term illnesses comes from young people. That was the most worrying thing, said Sunak. Those who are in the prime of their lives, just starting work and family, are instead parked in welfare, he said. And he will never blame or downplay people's illnesses from which they suffer. Anyone who has suffered from mental illness or has experienced it in family or friends knows that these feelings are real, he says. But it just would be as wrong to ignore this growing trend, to just sit back and accept it. The British Prime Minister presented a plan with 5 reform measures then. In 2011, 20% of people who were assessed for their ability to work were deemed unfit, Sunak said. According to the latest figures, it is now 65%. That is wrong. People are not 3 times sicker than they were a decade ago, in his view. The world of work has changed. Anyone who is sick has to get their treatment, but there are now many jobs that you can do from home, even if you have limited mobility or have depression. So we will tighten the criteria for incapacity for work. Assessing whether someone is fit to work puts doctors in a conflict situation, said the Prime Minister. A family doctor who refuses to sign a medical certificate, especially a long-term one, quickly loses patients. So family doctors will no longer be responsible for this in the future, but rather an unspecified committee of experts. The plans are reminiscent of the duty to be a chief physician in Austria and Germany. We have the same here, and they still want to test a system like that. Someone who received benefits should also do something in return, said Sunak. He wants to tighten the rules there too. Anyone working less than half a full-time week must attempt to find additional work in order to receive benefits. There are 500,000 people who have been out of work for 6 months and 250,000 people who have not been working for 12 months, but almost 1 million vacancies. And the consequence, although no longer in this legislative period, should be anyone who does not accept a job loses all entitlements to benefits after 12 months. In Great Britain, a system called Personal Independent Payment, or PIP, was established. This refers to aid payments that are intended to offset extra costs in everyday life caused by an illness. The number of people eligible has doubled since 2019, with 5,000 people joining every month. And 3 million people now receive subsidies up to about £500 per month. And Sunak wants to review the system and switch to more one-off payments. We will not allow fraudsters to exploit the generosity of the British people, says Sunak. In the future, benefit fraud will be treated like tax fraud. The government wants to pass a law to have better insight into bank data, and AI should help track down benefit fraudsters. The Sunak announcements led to an outcry among health experts, but also unions and charities. They called the plans deeply damaging and his choice of words unacceptable. Sick people would now be subject to performance sanctions. It's insulting to those 1.9 million people who are waiting to receive support for their mental health, they said. And the proposals would be dangerous and risk leaving people with disabilities destitute. That was said by James Taylor, the strategy director at Scope. The charity fights for equality for people with disabilities, and the speech would feel like a full-scale attack on people with disabilities. I mean, here in Germany, as I said, and in Austria, we have a system that people who are not working because of health issues are sent to a certain doctor at our health department. And that doctor is assessing if they are able to work or not. And not the family doctor only can do that for 6 weeks. And without any issues, then after 6 weeks, the payment is a different thing. And for long-term illnesses, you have to go to the health department doctor to be checked if you are eligible to work or not. And so there might be some similarities here, but we have to see how the law will be in the end. But the wording was definitely something you can criticize. And if you want to see something else, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.